Welcome to your Sprinkle of Hope podcast, and your host, Jason. And today I had the awesome opportunity of interviewing a person by the name of Joy, which is something Shane and I talk a lot about, joy and what that means to us. And she gives some really good information about relationships and just how to work through those. She gives some really good insight into fear, overcoming that fear, and just holding our kids back sometimes, or holding ourselves back from really getting what it is that we want out of life. So listen in to Joy Reid.
Welcome to the Sprinkled with Hope podcast.
This is Jason. And this is Shane.
And it's podcast time.
Welcome to your Sprinkle with Hope podcast, and your host, Jason. And we are so excited to bring Joy Reid with us today. And she's just so super awesome. So I'll introduce her just a little bit. Joy is the founder of Punchline Agency and has also been a speaker herself over the last decade. Between 2005 and 2015, Joy worked as a conference director for her parents' Love and Respect marriage conferences. She later created the Love and Respect Now website and the Illumination Project small group study as resources for a generation on the topic of singleness, dating, and marriage. In 2014, Christianity Today named Joy one of the 33 leaders under the age of 33 shaping the next generation. So, Joy, let's just talk about some of the cool things that you've done, and so how did you kind of get your work started, or how did that come about?
Well, thank you for having me. And 33 under 33, that was back when I was under 33. I'm now 40. I've hit that milestone, which, caused me to dye my hair
Welcome to the
blonde.
club.
Yeah. I didn't buy the Corvette, but I dyed my hair blonde.
Right.
So, working through some things. But no, all that stuff that you mentioned was, it was during a season. Now I have started a speaking agency and a literary agency. I represent people who are good on the page and stage. And so that's my whole world now. I've gotten married. I live in France with my husband and 2 kids. But those things that you mentioned were really formative to how I got into the world of speaking and writing. As I mentioned, I worked for my parents who do marriage conferences. My father has written several books, and my parents speak together on the topic of relationships and parenting and things like that. But back in 2007, I believe, I was directing all of their speaking conferences. And so we're doing marriage conferences. I'm single. I actually started dating someone and thought I was going to get married. And it ended up being a horrible relationship that had to end. And then I was like, I'm directing marriage conferences and I can't make relationships work and I'm broken and all those things. So that's what led me to then starting this kind of for the younger generation relationship discussion. So I had the blog and I did video blogs. And that was really my passion, my life's message in that season of life. Because I had experienced extreme heartache. But I also had the wisdom that I had learned from my parents. And at those conferences, so many people said, I wish I would have known this 20 years ago. If only I knew then what I know now, which is why I called it Love and Respect Now, so that my generation didn't have to say, like, why didn't anybody teach us this 20 years ago? Yeah. So it was really fun. I loved doing it. I still, my husband makes fun of me. I love watching, all those, terrible shows on Netflix about, matchmaking or, Love is Blind, those things.
Right.
I'm fascinated by the human condition and people's desire for love and relationships. And so it's still something that's part of my DNA. But now I have transitioned into representing people who I feel like are also holding messages that are heavy on their heart that they want to get out to the world.
Yeah, I love that, because that's totally what I think, that there's a lot of people that have those messages that need to share throughout the world, if that's overcoming fear or whatever it is, right? I mean, there's a myriad
Yeah.
of subjects out there.
Well, that's
So
why you're doing this podcast, because you said you
exactly.
had a dark season and you were like, I want to just sprinkle hope and joy and happiness. So it's good when we can use our pain to hopefully help others.
Yes, it's true. And so did you do anything with that love and relationship stuff still, or is that kind of
Yeah, no, I'm still a huge fan of my parents.
awesome?
But
Right.
yeah. But what happened during that time was, because I was speaking and I was writing blogs and doing these video blogs, I had been around publishers because of my dad being an author. I had built enough of kind of a thing that I was approached by publishers to write a book. And
Oh,
at
okay.
that time, my dad he had been in the publishing industry for long enough, and he knows me so well that he was like, I think you could be your own agent. I think you have the personality to be an agent. And I was like, thank you. Personality to be an agent. I don't know if
Right.
that's a compliment. So I did that, and I learned, because a lot of times the reason publishers require agents is because they don't want a lot of people who don't know anything about contracts, that are there to write
Right.
books asking legal jargon.
Right.
And you don't want to have to negotiate on behalf of yourself,
Right.
And so I did it, but I realized this would be, I learned all about the contracts, and I knew about the publishing industry because of my dad, but I was like, this would be much more fulfilling to do for someone else. I like cheering people on. And
Right.
I also felt like the work that I was doing, I was doing this blog and these video blogs, and I felt like I had this good collection of content, because people would write questions and then I'd kind of figure out the answer. I'd talk to my parents and I would give a
Okay.
response. And I felt like I was starting to get kind of the same repertoire of questions. And I was like, I've built something. I feel like I want to put a bow on it. They can still use it. And now I'm ready to move on to something else. And so that's when I transitioned away and decided to start this agency to represent others.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you are currently living in France, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How's
Oui,
that? Like,
oui.
yeah. Are you learning French? Do you know French or?
Oh, please. That's a sore subject. My husband
Okay, we'll
is
move
like
on.
yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, I feel like I always have to give an excuse. My husband is a language savant, and he he speaks this. It's his job that brought us here. But we
Okay.
both very much wanted to come here. I love living here, but I am not a language savant. And he's gracious. He's like, I really think it's because you are a communicator and you love the nuance of, communicating and good rhetoric, that like I get paralyzed. Like I understand, I know vocab, but I'm like, the irony is that I am a literary agent, but I couldn't tell you like the rules of English, And I'm like, if I don't know what an adverb is in English, I'm not gonna be able to figure out that sentence structure in French. Okay. So I mime a lot, and I know enough to be really polite to French people in French about why my French is so bad. And that's got me by well.
So the real question is the food just amazing or what?
It is. It's funny. We have another friend that from the US that lived abroad, and she was like, I miss the how good the food is in France and Europe, but I also, when I'm there, I miss the flavor of American food. So
Ah,
like food here is like, you don't feel gross after you eat,
right.
because there's like restrictions on how much MSG they can put in stuff.
Right.
And so I can eat so much more bread here. Like every time I go back to the
Interesting.
US, I automatically gain like 5 to 8 pounds. And then I'll come
Wow.
back here and it like goes away. So, but
Huh,
you don't have the same like Cheetos, Mexican
right.
food, like the extreme flavor of like
Yes.
American food I do miss. So, but yes, food here it's a culinary yeah, it's there's never not a restaurant to go try.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there anything that maybe you picked up from your parents teaching about love and marriage that maybe you could share with our audience? I mean, we have a lot of women and men that listen, and
Mhm.
there's obviously this we're in this age where learning how to live with somebody else and be respectful of each other and working in a relationship is crucial. So is there
Yeah.
maybe like one or two things that, or even that you've picked up in your married life that you could help share with others that could help them, and if they're struggling in their marriage? Or
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many things that come to mind. I feel like something that's been really helpful for me is my dad always talks about, like, you didn't marry Hitler's distant cousin, like,
right,
you didn't want it. Now, there are bad people and there are bad relationships that you need, when you're in harm's way, you need to get out of it. But for the most part, two people walk down the aisle not saying, I hate you, you hate me, let's get married.
right,
And yet we don't tend to our relationship, and we let things fester. And over time, I actually had lunch with a friend yesterday, and she was talking about how she really feels like you have to, sometimes people have just married the wrong person, and you have to make sure that you marry the right or no, that's how she was saying you just have to marry the right person, you have to marry the right person. And I was like, yes, but also that logic then I think allows people to justify when they have not tended to their relationship and their marriage, to
right,
go, I married the wrong person, therefore I'm going to leave. And the reality is we have this notion of the one, but I actually don't believe in the one. This is something that I actually talked a lot about. I don't believe in the one until you choose the one.
yep,
And then outside of you being in harm's way,
right,
you need to work at this person that you have committed to being the one. But the reality is you could probably make your marriage work with multiple people. And yet we let these problems fester in our marriage. And so then when there's somebody over here that we're actually not living with from the day in and day out, and we start imagining like, oh, actually, I think maybe they were supposed to be the one. I'm sorry, but the problems that you have with the current person are probably going to come 5 years
yep,
down the road if you change and marry another person. So again, there's circumstances when you've got to, like, it's not a good situation. But for the most part, if you are married to a good-willed person that you would leave your children alone with, then there seems to me that there can be a real opportunity for getting help and working to get back to that place that you were when you walked down the aisle and you had tears in your eyes and you were ready to spend forever together. And my husband and I actually make a point to talk openly about the fact that we go to marriage counseling. I
right,
think so often people do premarital counseling, and that's good, that's fine. But you also are kind of in this state where you're like, we're engaged, we're getting married. Like, most people aren't going to go through premarital counseling and go, yeah, I get, probably not going to go through it. But so
right,
we committed we knew we had enough people in our life that said, yes, you are right. This is good. There weren't people going, red flag, red flag. So we decided to proceed into marriage. And then we decided throughout our marriage, we are going to invest in marriage counseling and seeing someone as preventative medicine, not as going to the hospital, the ER, when things have gotten too
right,
bad. So I know it's expensive, and I know that sometimes people can't afford it, but there are organizations, there's oftentimes churches with lay counselors, people that you can, go to if you don't have the money to go see a clinical psychologist or something like that. And I would really encourage, and if you can't even do that, find another couple that's older, maybe 20 years down the road, that you see as having a good marriage and you know that they have wisdom, and ask if you can start meeting with them once a month and being honest about your relationship as preventative medicine.
I love that, everything you just said about just, I think you can make a relationship work with anyone. I totally agree with you on that, that really it's two people working together for a common cause, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not, they're out to get you and you're out to get them. And so I think, yeah, working together and having counseling would be a great way to do that, because then you have
Yeah.
that mediator, that person that says, no, he's not right and you're wrong. It's, let's come to an agreement on what it is that you're working through.
Yeah. And also I think sometimes people get scared about, oh, we fight over, or we just keep coming back to the same little fight, and somehow
Mhm.
let a lie set in that, like, something's wrong with that. And again, if it's a really, really serious thing, like that's one thing. But for the most part, every relationship, if you're living with someone day in and day out, you are going to have conflict. And so instead of freaking out over that, my husband and I have just created, we have an understanding now of why we keep having the same fight around bedtime, you know,
Right.
or, you know, we have our fights, and our commitment is we don't have the thing of like, you have to repair before you go to sleep, because sometimes you just need to have a little space and go to sleep. But we repair, and we always know that we're going to repair quickly. It might just be the next morning. It might be that one of us goes for a walk and we come back. But like, that is, fighting is not a problem. It's if you don't repair after the fight.
Yeah. I love that. I love that idea of repair. You know, I can just think of repairing different relationships or repairing different things. Yeah. You're constantly trying to make it better. And so I love everything you said. Super, super great. I'm kind of curious because Shane and I, we talk about fear a lot. I'm curious to get your take on, you know, what is something that would hold somebody from doing that thing because of fear. You know, do they want to accomplish a goal, but yet they're afraid to do that thing, like fly on an airplane, right? They're terrified to do that, and so they just don't go anywhere. They just drive everywhere. I'm curious to
And
get your
so
take on fear.
that is an interesting question. You know, I think our fears are strongest in the middle of the night when we wake up. A lot of things that freak us out, I think truly, it's like there is something cognitively like in the night where you cannot process things
Right.
as sanely as you can in the day. So if you're freaking out at night, just tell yourself like, hey, this is something about the time of day it is. I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna write my fear down in a little journal next to my bed, and then I'm gonna revisit this with someone who I know can speak truth into my life. I guess I have always kind of had the posture of seeking wise counsel. And so whatever fear you have, go to people who you know you and are for you, with the posture of going, I want to bring this fear to them with a posture of openness. I think sometimes it's just so easy for us to shut people down when people are trying to encourage us. No, I used to take improv comedy, and you've probably heard the phrase yes and.
Right.
And so that principle is based off the fact that in an improv scene, two people come onto the stage not knowing what the other person's going to say, and one person might say, stick them up, this is a bank robbery. And the principle of yes and doesn't mean that you go, yes, yeah, here, take all the money. It doesn't mean that you just say yes to whatever's presented. It means that you are yesing the scene. So if you were just like, no, you're not, you're a monkey, that's
Right.
that's knowing the scene. Yesing the scene goes, wait, no, don't shoot, so you actually can say no and be yes anding. And so I would say, when you are going to people for advice, it is so, as someone who does consulting and really loves to speak truth into people's lives, there are certain people who keep coming back to me with the same problem, and it is actually really de-energizing, because I know, like, man, you are just gonna, like, any suggestion I give you, you're gonna tell me why it's not gonna work. And so I actually think sometimes people's fear is actually a safety mechanism. And it's like it's just like they just want to stay in it, because to have freedom, to not have fear, they wouldn't know what to complain about or what to hold on to. Having freedom actually scares them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say, if you have a fear and you still have it in the daytime, take that to someone who's older and wiser, or just wiser. And as you take that fear to them, tell yourself first, I'm going to do everything I can to have an open posture to the encouragement and the advice that they're giving me. I'm going to yes and, even if it's scary, I'm going to yes and then look back and see how it turned out. But if you're not at a place where you can yes and wise counsel in your life, I don't know if you really want to overcome that fear.
Oh, I love that. That's such great wisdom in what you just said. Honestly, that does answer my question. Because I think just anytime we can have a tip or a trick to help us get over some of those fears, I think that's really what oftentimes hold us back from becoming what we want to become and getting better every single day, is because we're afraid to take a step, or we're afraid to do something. No, I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm good. I don't need to do anything, or I don't want to make waves, so I'm just going to sit here and do nothing, right? Instead of like, let's move forward to, let's get all of our garbage out and whatever it looks like, and let's go forward.
Yeah. I think some people are so used to sitting in their dark spaces or their fears, or having those conversations. Even as I'm now a mom of 2 young kids, and I'm around other moms of young kids, I just see how fear paralyzes so many parents. And I'm like, what would you do if you just, I mean, you can't not care about your kids and want, good for their, you not care about their well-being, but like, to me, it feels like this is robbing you of living in the present moment and delighting in your child, because you are so worried that they are going to fall off that slide or hurt that kid or not get into that school. And it's like, those things may happen. Like, I've often said, like, go to the worst. What's the worst thing that can happen here? Go there.
Right.
And then, you know what? It might happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So let's just enjoy our child. It feels very, it just feels like people are putting themselves in straitjackets. It's like that. And that also, that like feeds to the kids.
Yes, it does.
They get that. They totally get that. And that has been my prayer and hope for myself as a mom. Because I can be intense, but I prayed that I would just delight in my kids and not let the natural, fear and worry about how they're going to turn out, keep me from missing them in the present moment.
I totally agree. I think oftentimes, and they're going to sense that as well, right? They're going to sense that the fear that you have. And I mean, fear is a learned response.
Totally.
When we're young, I'm going to touch that hot stove. And they go for it. Yeah. They don't know any different. So that fear really is a learned response. We're teaching them to be afraid of whatever it is that's in front of them. So awesome. So great. So near the end of the podcast, Shane and I do a thing that we call the double down dose. And so it's 2 questions that we ask all of our guests, and they're simple questions, but sometimes hard to answer. So I'm curious your take on these. So the first question is,
a good alliteration. Double down dose. Let's go.
Yes, let's go. So the first one is, what is your definition of hope?
If you have true hope, you live differently today.
I like that.
I have to say, there was some version of that that just came to my head because it really stuck with me. This past Sunday, I attended church, and that was kind of how they defined hope. They were like, if you truly have hope in something, then in the future, like, because hope is in the future,
right?
Then that will, whatever that thing is that you hope in the future, that greatly impacts how you live today. It will change how you live today. So I can't say that was from my own. I heard something to that effect today. So I got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I get it. But I love the answer, though. I think it's true that, hope is future, right? We're hoping to have a better tomorrow than we did today. We're hoping for, better wellness or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. I mean, if you hope for, if I hope to lose 10 pounds, I got to do something different today.
Yeah. Because what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So awesome. So the second part of the double down dose is, what is your definition of love?
Man, do other people sit and ponder for a few minutes? Can you
Yes,
edit that
yes,
out?
they do.
What is my definition of love? Um, I think love, oh man, it's hard, but I would say in one facet, love is serving with no expectation.
Mm. Yeah, it does seem interesting when we ask this question specifically about love. Almost 99% of our guests have like stopped and been like, wait a minute. What
Can I have
what
a
is love?
Webster's dictionary?
Yeah, because there's different kinds of love, right? There's
Yeah,
love with your
yeah,
spouse as opposed to love with a child or love with a
yeah,
coworker, or something like that. Those are
yeah,
different types of love, but
yeah,
that's usually not what we're looking for. It's like, what is love? To love somebody else,
yeah,
maybe that you don't even know, right?
yeah,
And how do you show that love and compassion for someone else that
yeah.
you know
It feels like the main threat thing that is threaded between all the types of love, and I could be wrong, but as I'm kind of trying to think through, is like something that is without expectation,
yeah,
like without, it's free, like it's something that you give with no expectation of return.
yeah. And I just, one of our recent guests talked about it as like, having a dog, right? A dog
Hmm.
loves their owner, and they may get locked into a room for
Hmm.
a whole day, but then when they see their owner, they love him or her unconditionally, right? Like it's
Yeah.
this automatic love. Whereas if you
Hmm.
locked your spouse in a room for a whole day, they'd be upset, right? They wouldn't really appreciate that.
Yeah. Good thing I didn't marry the dog.
No, I love this conversation. I love all the things that you've mentioned. That I think there's some great wisdom in what you've said, and I really appreciate your time um, with us today, and really just hope the best for you in the future and your future endeavors. But thank you for coming
Thank
on
you.
and joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jason. I'm sorry that your brother got booted off, but
Yeah,
I love what you guys are doing as well. So thank you for putting joy and hope into the world.
yeah, absolutely.